Welcome to Making a Mark, the podcast about leadership and practice in architecture. Join me, Mark Steppan, an architect with over 45 years of experience, as we explore opinions on leadership, soft skills, and their impact to the practice. Today, we're going to talk to Scott Frandsen of the UC Berkeley Calmans. He is the head coach and a three-time Olympian and a silver medal winner in the Olympics in crew. I believe that was in the pair. I'm not going to delve into all the things that Scott's gone through in history to explain his bio, so I'm going to let him say a little bit here. Welcome, Scott. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Happy to be here, and hello to everyone listening. Yes, Scott Frandsen. My path started, I grew up near Vancouver up in Canada. Found my way down to Berkeley for university to row and study. I was part of a very successful stretch at Cal, and we won 4 national championships in a row. Graduated with a business degree and just an amazing experience at Cal. On to Oxford to get a master's and race in the boat race against Cambridge, which we won. And then onwards to the Canadian national team for rowing for the Athens and Beijing and London Olympics. And as Mark already said, I was fortunate enough to win a silver medal in Beijing in the pair or the 2-man boat. And then, had the life decision of going into banking or finance, which is what my business degree set me up for, or trying out coaching. And I thought I'd try coaching for a year or two, and the banking job would always be there. And here I am 14 years later, still coaching, and very grateful that I was given the opportunity to impact and now lead the program that totally changed my life, Calmans Rowing. A bit different on this podcast as I'm not an architect, but yeah, happy to be here and lend my perspective on leadership and teams and that whole thing.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Good to have that short intro for you. As you mentioned, yes, you're not an architect, but as I've discussed it at prior interviews, this is really all about leadership. And this is a people skill discussion more so than an architecture discussion. Yes, there's going to be relationships down the road about how you lead actual project teams and get documentation done at some point. But the reality is what we're talking about is people skills. And so we're going to talk today about what I consider a rarely understood subject, and that is actually leadership. And so I'm going to start with a kind of big one. What does this word mean to you if you had to try to define it in less than a 20-minute definition?
Yeah, it's tough to come up with that concise or succinct definition.
Yeah.
But it's providing clarity or direction to a group of people towards a common goal. And as I thought about coming and helping and doing this podcast, I thought, okay, how would I define it, or how do I try to install it or instill it? And I just kept coming back to like clarity. I think it's providing clear expectations, a clear path or daily habits, what is expected and what are we all driving towards. And obviously there's parallels there in the architecture world and the sport world. It's like when there is a lack of clarity, I think that leads to confusion and underperformance. So in my world of sport, it's really clearly defining what we are trying to do each year or what the end goal is, what the then daily or weekly or monthly goals are, or what is really needed on the tiny level of 100 or 1,000 little decisions every day, or how we conduct ourselves as individuals and as a team, and how that all has to lead towards our final goal of winning, for me, a national championship every year. So that's what I think a successful leader needs to start with, is that clarity on what you're doing on a daily basis and how that, providing the clear line of sight to how that leads to the overall goal.
Thank you. It is really a very difficult concept, I think, to short circuit an answer to.
Yeah.
And it means very different things to different people. And there's good leadership and there's bad leadership. They all have some things in common, I certainly believe, that translates over all the professions and sports and things. That for the most part, all the good leaders have to lead with empathy and respect and honesty and clarity. There's obviously degrees of all of that. And depending on the profession or the sport, and historically how leading has been done, there are differences, certainly.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the different worlds of leadership, well, there's going to be a different combination of all those different ages. When you lead in with empathy, I think yes, and there are definitely moments of that within. I have a team of between 60 and 70 athletes, student athletes that are 19 to 23. So there are going to be moments where they're hard charging and feeling great, and there are going to be moments when they need that helping hand of empathy, and there needs to be both. But yeah, I think it continues to come back to clarity of purpose, what you're there for. There is like the leading by example aspect to it of, I think the guys on my team need to see me living everything that we're then talking about. If there's a disconnect there, I think that falls apart pretty quickly. But yeah, it's been an interesting sort of self-assessment or dive into how I lead. I don't know if I've really thought of it to try to define it. So it's been an interesting process for me.
I'd say the same thing for me as well. I think that some people, and I would frankly put you and I in this category, have some of the innate abilities to lead in a way that I deem appropriate or better because we can show respect and empathy. We still have to push people, we still have to help direct them, but we help by delegating appropriately, standing behind what we delegate. We match the ideals of what we're trying to propose, they look like in performing duties by what we do. And so the setting of an example, if we don't set a good example and we say, hey, I need you to do this, and we do the opposite, you start eroding any trust. And if you erode the trust, then you won't have buy-in. Then you won't have engagement. Then you won't have the involvement you need to perform. And even in architecture, you have to perform, you have to design, you have to document, you have to draw, you have to think of these amazing things and control all these people and situations on a daily basis. It's just not having the physical nature of the sports. And I played sports. I was fortunate to have, I thought, actually pretty good leaders for coaches in track in high school, track in college, and tennis in college. And if they didn't have the right clarity of intent, and we need you to do these things, and this is how we're going to get better, how we're going to work at improving our bodies and our approaches, it wouldn't have been as fun, and we wouldn't have followed them as well. And I think that, yes, I'm interviewing you, but I'm having things to say. I think that that kind of leadership is not always noticed by those that are being led. They either gravitate to it, gravitate away from it. And you're right also about the ages. When you're talking about high school kids, college kids, and post college, there's a big difference in maturity and world experience that impacts things we say and how we say them and how we relate.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you found that dealing with the different kids, as well as kids, young adults who you're helping develop that aren't even all from the same culture.
Yeah, the team of say 60, 62 this year, half of them are Americans and from all over the US. And then the rest are from all over the world. And a lot of times when they come from Europe or Australia or New Zealand, yeah, it's a big cultural eye opener for them to start US university and then also become a part of this larger team. So again, leading with the behavior or the ideals of trying to mesh all that together, and then lead with the energy that you want the guys to exhibit every single day. Especially college athletes on a daily basis, waking up at 5:30, 5:45. That's not a normal schedule for most 19 to 23-year-olds. And so making sure that the guys understand that you got to walk through the boathouse doors at 6:30 in the morning and be excited. And if the coaches are dragging and not exhibiting that energy or that attitude, then there's no chance of the guys doing it either. So again, leading by example with how you approach the daily challenges, but also, yeah, if you're feeling tired or if you're feeling down or frustrated or whatever, you got to be able to leave that at the door and bring the energetic attitude that we want everybody to have.
Thank you. Good points. The next question I have for you, I think, is a hard one, and maybe we only take part of it, and you've already talked about some of this. So you've had a very interesting and long journey to get from high school rower to where you are today for Cal, having been there 14 years, you said?
14, yeah.
And so over the years, you've transitioned from this young athlete to a college student to a 3-time Olympian to venturing into coaching. How has that journey in your mind impacted your being a leader that you are today? Granted, we don't always think of ourselves as, oh, hey, I'm this big leader. So you have to think of it differently. But
Yeah, I recognize that I'm definitely in that leadership role now. Obviously, I'm head coach, and so have to lead the team culture, lead that daily energy that I just talked about. I never really saw myself as that leader as I was making my way through Cal and then the Canadian team. And looking back at it, I was probably more of a leader than I thought I was. And that's the leadership that I try to promote within my team now is we don't have team captains. We don't have any sort of set structure because I think then first you risk who is in that position. Is that the right person for it? But also then I think everybody else sees that hierarchical leadership structure. And if you're not in those positions, a captain or co-captain or whatever, then you step back and you shy away from making good daily leadership decisions. So I think the leadership that I had through most of my athletic career was, I keep going back to the word of clarity of like, I knew exactly what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it and how I was going to do it. And I wasn't shy about communicating that. And I think that can be magnetic. I think that can really bring a lot of people along with you, especially at that young age when people can be, young men, young athletes can be shy about being clear and about being loud about what they want to do. So I think that's where the leadership within my personality started. And then you become the new guy onto the Canadian team and then eventually into the veteran role. And you start to have more awareness of your impact on the group. And it was an interesting transition from my athletic career. I really felt like I was a veteran athlete at one point and then transitioned into being an athlete coach and then slowly over the 6 years as being the assistant into more of a coach. But even my first 3 or 4 or 5 years of coaching, I still felt like I was just the veteran athlete on the team that was conveying my knowledge or my experience to the group. And obviously that identity gets farther and farther away from being an athlete and closer to just being a coach and a leader. And you have to figure out different ways to communicate like what you want the group to do or who you want them to be on a daily basis, because it goes from being able to show them to having to communicate clearly in terms of what you want the goal to be. I feel like we're in a really good spot with the team in terms of the internal leadership, how the coaches are communicating what we expect on a daily basis. And I think that's the biggest area of growth for me right now is getting better, getting clearer with what I expect. I think I still fall back into my athlete role of they're going to make these decisions or they're going to know what I want because I'm showing them. And that I can't always rely on that. I don't have the ability to show that on a daily basis. I now have to figure out how to maturely communicate it, which is not my strength, but I'm trying to grow there.
okay, great. Actually, there's a couple things that I want to tag on to that were really good. And I think that's important because the last thing you concluded with there is you realize there are still things that you can get better at. And that's what good leaders and just people in general should be aware of. But being able to have the self awareness is not easy, and not everyone has it. And I think that being able to develop that goes a long way to making you have the ability to be a good leader. Because then you don't put yourself on a pedestal and think everything you do is perfecto. And everybody else should just know exactly what to do because you're the perfect example. And that's not really how it works. That's not a sustainable leadership model. It does exist. It has been successful in creating athletes to perform well. It's been successful in businesses. There's a lot of businesses that are run very poorly but are very successful. And it's in spite of the leadership, in my opinion. One of the things you mentioned is the clarity of purpose, let's say, and the direction. And so there's a book and a video by a leadership coach presenter named Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And he made this awesome 18-minute TED talk back in Puget Sound in 2014. It has nothing to do with architecture, but I had to listen to this as part of a big architects principles and partners retreat back in 2012, 13, 2012. And it just was awe-inspiring. It had nothing to do with architecture, but it had everything to do with understanding and helping people grow to understand the why. So there's discussions on golden circles and why some companies and people have been successful that were in his book and in the presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know of it, but
I know of the name and I know of the book, and I think I've seen some short videos. I have not seen the entirety of it, but I obviously will now.
you should. I sat there with a bunch of people and I had tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
Which happens to me easily for both good and bad things. But it was just really inspiring. And so now that I've been doing more of this coaching and the leadership discussions, I've come to rely more and more on things that he has said both there and elsewhere, because you realize it's the why that's important, not the what, not the how. The how is, okay, executing documentation and design or whatever it might be. The why is why, so to speak, you're all together in the same space doing the same thing.
Yeah.
What's the why that you're rowing towards? Okay, it could be winning the national championship. It could be performing our best as a group on the water. And if we do that, there's no telling what we can accomplish.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the why, not, hey, we got to do this better, or you got to appease me, or you got to things. And the what is, okay, the proper training, and the how is the proper, there are these things. So
Yeah.
it's
And
applicable in many ways.
I think there's even like a second layer to the why. As you were telling that story, and I haven't read the book or the podcast, but I will now. But like that first level of, okay, why are we here? In my world, okay, we're here to win a national championship. Okay, why? And like that second or third level of why really gets to the core of why. Okay, because I want to be the best. I want to prove former coaches wrong. What is it for each individual athlete or employee? We went through this, and I don't think it was intended to be as impactful as it ended up being, but the night before the final in Athens, my first Olympics, and as I was in the 8 that year, so 8 rowers, 1 coxswain, and we just met. And the coach had prepared us to have an answer of why are we here? And I think the first couple guys went, and it was like, because we're trying to win, or we think we can win, or we've been training for 4 years, that sort of thing. And then the answers started to get more and more in depth. And it was that second or third level of the why. It wasn't to try to win. It was because I've wrapped my entire life around all this training and I want it to mean something. Or for me, it was just wanting to be the best. And it sounds trite or it sounds surface level, but that's what really drove me as an athlete. I wanted to do everything I possibly could to be the best. And so the answers that got into the deeper whys were really impactful. And I think it really brought that crew or that organization together. So I think, yeah, it's getting into the why and even that second or third level of why.
Yeah. See, you have perfect experiences.
Yeah.
To help explain, going backwards, how things transpired and how they helped you grow as a person. Happens to be you're a leader, but it helped you grow as a person, which now has allowed you to be the quality leader that I believe you are for the program and for the kids. Another thing you talked about that I think is important is sharing knowledge. Okay, so as you're transitioning from the athlete to the beginning of being a coach, you're in this interesting transition mode because I'm sure you still wanted to be performing as an athlete. You liked it enough to
Yeah.
do all of those years of grimacing and pain and everything. But yet there's something at the core of what you were doing that's at the core of you, that's the why in you, that is why you're still involved in it. That's why you're sharing your knowledge and your experience and your expertise. And that's the same thing that the good leader in architecture does, is sharing the knowledge of where to look for answers and options, and not deferring information, but delegating some tasks and explaining with clarity directions, giving space. And the other thing, it's a little bit different, I think, in the athletic world than the professional world, but you can correct me if you think differently. One of the really important things that I think the good leader, let's say in architecture, does, they have to provide safe place, a safe space for their staff to be in on a daily basis. In other words, they have everybody has tasks to do and they have deadlines and you have to perform at a certain level. Mistakes happen, things don't get done quite right.
Yeah.
The clients can get really upset, or there can be problems in the field and with construction, and projects can go over budget and miss deadlines, as well as there just needs to be space for general growth and knowledge. You can do a couple things. You can slam your team, you can pass on, make them take the responsibility for screwing up and not taking it yourself, and not being able to take a load on your shoulders, let's say, for things that are happening in there, but then explain them and give the space for people to explain to you what happened and have adult conversations back and forth. I'm not saying this exactly the way I want to, but basically you create the knowledge that people can talk to you and can explain the realities of situations, and you're not going to, quote unquote, slam them down.
Yeah, I think the time or the generation of that is gone, and probably for the best. The idea of the old style, old school harsh coach, or the old school harsh manager, did it get results? Maybe short term, but there wasn't that belief built, or that team built around just getting torn down all the time. And I also think that you can be very blunt, you can be very honest with feedback. And I remind my guys all the time, like, this, they got into this world to try to be the best at it, and sometimes there are hard edges with that, and there needs to be that second layer of okay, the first layer of, okay, that wasn't good enough, or the project didn't go as well, and there's a certain level of credit built up over the course of a career, or over the course of even a year, of that an athlete is generally consistent or generally performs to the expectations. And then if there's one instance or one workout where that doesn't happen, okay, the feedback of that wasn't good enough, what's going on, outside in your student life or personal life that led to that. Not being that supportive arm around the shoulder, or my office is always open to come and talk about what's going on. And again, that wasn't good enough, so we had to make sure that doesn't happen again. So I think there's too much of a fear of delivering pretty honest, pretty hard feedback in the general world now. And I think that's to the detriment of high performing groups that want that feedback just delivered in maybe a more supportive or a different way than it used to be.
Very true. And that just applies everywhere.
Yeah. And I hear all the time, oh, this generation is soft, or this generation doesn't know how to work hard. And I just completely disagree. If we treat them like that, then yes, then they won't. But if you treat them with the respect and the honesty of, hey, this is what these are our expectations, this is how you're going to do it, and there's support, high expectations, high support. Like, this is what we're doing, and this is the level of expectation to be on this team or within this company or whatever. then I think this generation is just as equipped to deal with those challenging goals, or as any other generation. But if we tiptoe around and treat them, we think they're too soft, then they will be.
Yeah, thanks. I have examples of past experiences with junior staff where we've given learning sessions at lunchtime and then opened it up for comments and questions. And some people, and many people, are reticent to ask questions in a group environment. And it was true in sports. They didn't want to ask anything about anything that would imply they didn't know something,
Yeah.
or they weren't doing something right, out for everybody else to see. So it's this level of vulnerability that it's also really important, both for the leader and for the leader to make it known that everybody else can show that vulnerability and they won't get in trouble for doing that, because it's actually a critical component of your makeup to do well, is to have that vulnerability and then work with it. And I had some young staff at one point come up to me after one of these sessions and go, "Oh, thank you so much for allowing us to ask you questions." And I was thinking, what do you mean? You could ask questions at any time. And someone, said, "Oh, no, we can't. We don't ever feel we can ask our project leader questions because it will slow down our production, and they just don't like having questions asked of them at any point. So we don't ask things, and so we're not learning anything, but we feel like we should be asking, but we don't feel we can." And so they were given this safe place to ask a question without having impact to their schedule or deliverables. And so they did, but they also stepped up and had enough self-confidence to go, "Hey, thank you. I need to be able to do this elsewhere." Without asking, can you take care of figuring out how to allow us that situation to improve? But then that's sad, because the people they're working under are big leaders, not understanding how to work with people. And that's where all this falls apart. And then that's not sustainable, and that's not productive. And it goes against everything that the leader is saying they have to do, which is to be more productive and to do it better. And they're just pushing the opposite direction. Do you think schools prepare growing adults to be leaders? Or is it something that we have to learn on our own, or a combination?
Yeah, my immediate answer is no. Schools and universities do, and maybe I need to learn more about all of that before I have that very decisive answer. But I think that's learned through experience of being on teams, of being in clubs, of learning how to deal with different social groups. I think learning how to be a leader in a classroom, okay, you can read a book on it, you can watch a podcast or a TED talk on it, but until you're actually in a difficult situation and learning how you respond, and then maybe how you could have responded better, no. I think my answer is no. I think you need to be in real life, real world situations that are difficult, and then learn from them. What do you think?
I agree. And while you're talking, I'm thinking about, okay, let me think about studios in college. And you're really not going to have classes on soft skills. And you're really not going, and nobody's going to want to take them because they won't understand the importance. Maybe I should have taken typing in high school. And like now, I still don't type as well as I should. But when you're in high school, you don't want to take typing or home ec. But at the same time, I think that it is on, and I think it is a responsibility of the professors to set better examples in leading. And the administration, and I'm thinking specifically now of architecture, because it's a smaller collection of people, should make sure that there are processes and approaches in place that help their teachers teach in a more respectful and leadership way. And that way they can set better examples without having to do a whole lot. And they don't have to do tons of other extracurricular stuff to actually start getting the ideas there, because they are growing young adults. And the purpose, in my opinion, besides what you learn for your discipline in school, is you're being put in environments to grow as a person. through good stuff, bad stuff, adversity, success, small groups, big groups. You have an opportunity to be in a big, huge melting pot of situations. That's sometimes easy to sink in. So somehow you need support so that you swim and jive and jump and whatever it might be. And that does, in a sense, need to be some, in my opinion, good friends who can see through things, or your professors to help. Because nobody's going to keep running to their advisors, generally speaking, at least in my experience.
No, I agreed. And I just keep thinking of it. I'm not sure you're ever going to get that real world experience that builds character or leadership qualities in a classroom. You need to be in sort of real world situations that are challenging, and the saying of what character is revealed or character is built in when you don't get what you want. And it's hard to really simulate that in a classroom. And you need to be in a real world situation where you are fighting for something that you want, or going after a group project, or going after something, and either getting it, and how do you manage that, or how do you deal, who are you in that moment, or not getting it, and who are you in that moment. And that's the kind of situation that teams provide, or sport provides, or I'm sure there's lots of other situations that can provide that as well. And yeah, who, it's easy to say you want to be this empathetic leader that has good composure in adversity. Okay, in the middle of a race when it's not going as well as you want it to, who are you there? You lose the seat race and you're not in the boat that you want to be in. Who are you in that moment? There's so many different teachable moments that sport provides that really shows you who you are in that moment, and how you need to grow and be better.
Yeah, and I think that part of the difficulty is you can't play act that moment. The emotions, the situation, no matter how good an actor you are, I think it's very hard to nearly, I don't want to say nearly impossible, but just say extremely hard to duplicate it well enough for it to actually be real.
Impossible.
I have not gone to 3 Olympics. I've not been at that class of an athlete. I've been a good athlete, and I had dreams that it would be really cool to go to the Olympics. Oh, why? Because it would be cool to represent my country and just perform with all those other people. Even if I didn't win, I would want to do the best I could possibly be in that environment. And that just seemed like it would be so cool.
Yeah.
That would take a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hard work, and a lot of not fun stuff, probably in the reality of things. And I don't think that the general public understands the sacrifices that business people make sometimes, or that athletes make, because they just see the Sunday afternoon or the event or whatever and forget about all the rest.
Yeah, you said it twice, so I'll jump on it. Not jump on it. I'll touch on it. I always flinch, or I always find it funny when athletes call it all the sacrifices that they gave up, or all the things that they gave up, all the sacrifices in life to be an athlete. Like, I just never saw it as a sacrifice. This was the opportunity that I had to go and dedicate my entire life to something, and to try to compete on the world stage, and try to compete to be the best. And I was never apologetic about missing the party, or missing the friend's wedding, or missing any of that stuff. And I think that's what part of that mindset is what freed me up to really go full tilt at rowing, or my sport. And yeah, I always try to correct other athletes when they view it as a sacrifice, or all the things they gave up. That's just not how I ever viewed it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I said, but that generated that. But I do think that the approach and the mindset necessary to perform at the highest level in anything you do requires many times that kind of approach.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
Yeah.
I think that,
and not everybody views it that way, to be clear. Most people don't. That's
sure. And I think that the concept of, oh, I to do this, I got to do all these things, and that means I'm going to sacrifice all this other stuff. I think then in hindsight, to me, that gives an understanding of your why is not as clear.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's okay that your goal is different, but don't think it's a different goal than it is. So I think that the self awareness of your situation and the understanding of what your why really is in that moment will allow you to be successful the way you need to be. But you won't be the same person as somebody else
No, I totally
who
agree.
is approaching it. And you could attain similar levels of success, both in sport and in business, but having approached them slightly differently. And don't try to confuse them,
Yeah.
I guess is how
Yeah.
I would
No, agree.
conclude it.
Agree.
Did you have a mentor that you relied on before coming the head coach that in hindsight had influence in ways you didn't realize until you were actually coaching?
Yes, I think all through my athletic career, the guys that I looked up to had what we talked about earlier, of that, just that clarity of this is who they are. They're charging towards their lofty goals. The Nito Simonsons, the Jake Wetzels, and the Mladen Stedziks of my college career. And then as I got into coaching, it was a collection of all of my coaches from high school through university, through Oxford, through all the different stages of the Canadian team, and trying to take the big positives out of all of them or most of them and leave the negatives. And so it was more of a mosaic or a collection of different possible mentors rather than one specific one.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're all flawed and shouldn't be idolized completely. So I just tried to pull the pieces out of all of my different, I think it was like eight or nine coaches. And obviously in different situations, I'd call Steve Gladstone, my main college coach, and ask him for advice. And the funny thing is, we were also competitors at that time, as I was the head coach at Cal and he was the head coach at Yale, and our two programs were the top two in the country. And still, we had really good sort of mentor type conversations that I was really grateful for. And then beyond that, yeah, pulling little bits from all the different coaches. My dad was my first coach, so pulling bits from him, and so yeah, little bits rather than one single mentor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. In my case, I don't even know if I could. One, I don't think I could just say, oh yeah, I have a single mentor in architecture,
Yeah.
let alone in anything else. It is a collection of people, and then it changes over time because sometimes you have to become enough self-aware that you go, oh, I really did learn a lot in that situation all those years ago from that person, but I didn't realize it at the time. And so it's like backwards mentoring.
Yep. Yep.
Tell us all about a singular experience that stands out for you regarding, I guess, regarding leadership, because that's what we're talking about versus, oh, hey, I had this great success on the water. Yeah. And it could be good or bad. It doesn't have to be good.
Yeah.
And while you're thinking, so when I was doing the last interview with an architect, I asked a similar question, and he elected to not pick something good. He picked something bad, and it was on himself for not being. And I'm not giving you a direction to go. I'm just saying it can be either way.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm blanking on an answer here.
And Scott, let me see if you can give me some example or an experience that you think was pretty singular or important to you or that stands out in some way regarding coaching or leadership or working as a team or dealing with all the alumni or whatever it might be that's singular that you can use to help you in your discussions with folks.
Yeah, I think the recent example that sort of springs to mind is at our national championships this past year. We had a really fast crew that I think had a chance to win. But in the semifinal, with about 15 strokes to go in very rough conditions, we had a mistake that basically stopped the boat and took the boat out of the final. And so all of a sudden, a crew that should have been competing for a national championship was into the B final, and a pretty traumatic experience for that crew, and took it from competing for this goal that we set for ourselves every day, every year, to not having that chance. And in that moment of I'm the head coach, right? I'm the one that's supposed to spring up and figure out what to say and lead in that moment. And I was going to get there, but my assistant coach, in the shock of kind of what was happening as the crew was still floating towards the dock, lots of tears, lots of shock. Yeah, but as I was processing it and trying to figure out what to do, my assistant coach, Sam, just came up beside me and said, "Time to lead." And in that moment of trying to separate the emotion out from the emotion and the disappointment out from all of it, it was like, yeah, okay, that's what my job is right now. And it took a little prodding from my assistant coach to get into that role or into that mindset. And yeah, he and I both walked down to the dock and spoke to the crew. And even again, I think in that moment, I think he was more eloquent than I was, and just summarizing for the guys that you can pour your whole heart and soul into something and not get what you want. And it's not obviously what we had hoped for, but sometimes that's life. And in those moments of disappointment and despair, you need to stand up tall and remember who you want to be. So it's, as we talked about earlier, it's not who you are in those moments of getting what you want or everything going successfully. It's who you are in those moments when everything's falling apart. And it took a little help, a little prodding from Sam, but I think we led the group through that moment really well, or as well as we could. And that next day, they had the chance to go out and race for seventh, which was again not what we wanted. But in that disappointment and in all of that emotion, they went out and represented themselves extremely well and won that race and set the time that was faster, the fastest of the day, fastest of the regatta. And I think in that moment of everything falling apart, we led them fairly well, and they really represented themselves and the team very well. Yeah.
Thank you.
And the emotion is right there still.
Oh, it's yeah. It's hard to compare that to something not going quite right in architecture, other than getting completely done with the project, and it's like a $50 million new building, and it's going to serve all these purposes, and the funds fall through. But then that's not on you. You didn't do something wrong, unless you did something wrong that
Wow.
screwed up the design and they weren't able to fund it, or they weren't able to build it, or. But the emotions are different. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. But I think that shows a variety of things. One, being able to lead in some fashion in a very trying moment when the emotions are so raw, it's very hard to think straight. And the brain closes down, I think.
Yeah.
You needed the support of your support mate.
Yeah.
He also needed you. And you guys needed to do this as the team for the team. And then you clearly did it well enough that they were able to regroup as a group, as a team, to perform that well the next day.
Yeah.
When frankly, it's much easier to not perform well the next day.
Yeah.
So the easy way out is to not do well. Oh, we got screwed. Oh, we just Well, there was an alligator under the boat and it hit us.
Yeah, it would have been really
so-
easy to just relent and have a very average performance. And I think a lot of people that haven't been in that sort of situation probably won't understand just how emotionally heavy and difficult that was to get back up and perform the next day. And again, credit to them for doing it.
And I'm going to assume that there was no finger pointing.
No, we win together, lose
Right.
together.
So it could have been a single person's mistake. But it's the boat's mistake.
Yeah.
And so that's how you have to move. And again, I think that it's a good example because it shows, at least in my mind, from the distance, that there was a safe enough place to have these discussions in this moment of extreme emotional turmoil, where your emotions are going to be different than the direct athlete's emotions, because you're not the one that were in the boat. It's different. You share a lot of it, but it's still different. But you gave space, you gave the situation, you gave the ability to have the conversations, even if they were short, even if they were whatever. That's what we've been talking about, being a leader, simply put. I guess in coming to an end here, yeah, and again, I want to thank you for spending the time with me in this discussion. I guess the question is, who can we rely on to continue teaching leadership? And I'll take it as that it's all of us, and it's an everyday thing, and it's never going to change, and it's never going to end.
Yeah, I agree. And I think outside of a classroom education, that's what sports teams or extracurriculars or clubs when you're growing up or when you're going through university, that's or even internships and jobs. That's who do you want to be in certain situations, you're putting yourself in that situation and learning from how you react and growing. It sounds textbook to say it like that, but that's what you're going to gain, or that's where you're going to gain it outside of a textbook.
Yeah, I can read all these books, but the reality is you have to figure out how to notice it on a day-to-day basis and then deal with it and work with it and recognize it, whatever the aspects might be that you're working on, and be able to continue to improve yourself, because we never stop learning, we never stop growing. Again, thank you very much, Scott. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully that this was enlightening to the listeners. And it was to me.
It was
So,
a valuable thought process or exercise for me as well.
thank you all for listening to Making a Mark, where we continue to expose, emerge, expand, and empower the practice of architecture. We look forward to seeing you next time.